Welcome to the InPowered Life podcast,
a space dedicated to spreading the message that you have the power within to create everything you seek.
So if you're ready to enroll in a new kind of higher learning, the kind that leads to true personal freedom, hang here with us.
We're your hosts, Rudi and Aniston, and this is InPowered Life. Welcome to the InPowered Life podcast. My name is Rudi Ricksteins, and today we're joined by Gina Worful. I'm excited to have this conversation because as a high-performance guy, I'm constantly coming up against some of these questions, and it's going to be fascinating to hear from somebody else who has taken this and turned it into their life's purpose and their mission. The founder of Mastering Mindfulness Institute, which is a science-based system that empowers people to take their health back. And I'm excited to bring you onto the show. Welcome to the InPowered Life podcast. Gina, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much, Rudi.
So I want to start right up front by just asking you, you're classically trained as a dietitian, but you don't necessarily approach what you're doing the same way everybody else does. And so you're unconventional in how you view it, but also in some of the tactics that you present to your clients and the people that you support. I would love to know, what was your health journey that really brought you to use these, let's call them unconventional methods?
Oh, yeah. I had about an existential career crisis because I've been very fascinated in the health and wellness world. And so I figured if I just get a degree in health and nutrition, I will have all the answers I need, right? I will know what is the best way to be healthy. I will have all the answers. And so I went to school to become a registered dietitian. I did that. And I opened up a private practice and I started working with my clients, and I did everything that I was taught. I made them a science-based meal plan. I was setting goals with them one at a time, taking it really slow. Okay, let's focus on this goal this week. And what would happen is every client would come in, they would kind of nervously share like, okay, this is where I'm struggling. We'd set a goal. And then they come back a week or two, and sometimes they would be like, I did it. I didn't drink the soda this week. And they'd be really proud, but it never sustained very long. And it was always one step forward, two steps back, one step forward, two steps back. Some of my clients I was working with for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and they were kind of making some progress, but nobody had life-changing results. Not for a long time. It wasn't like sustained if they started getting results. And so I decided to continue on. And I said, I'm sure if I get a master's degree, then I'll have the answers, because there's something that I'm missing here. I'm doing what I'm supposed to. And so I went to school for another few years, got my master's degree, continued working with clients. And at the same time, I noticed in order for me to stay healthy and to stay in shape, I had to obsess about food. I was thinking about food all day long. I was tracking my food. I was counting calories. And I was going through these intense periods of like really doing well, really holding on to it, staying motivated, starting my mornings with a ton of motivation. And it felt very, very intense. And I had to be very focused. And so I started to wonder, if it is this hard for me, because I am just thinking about food all day, I have so much knowledge, can I expect other people to do the same? Do I even believe in what I'm teaching other people? And I realized that even with more degrees, people were coming back week after week after week, and nobody was really having huge life-changing results. And I even called other dietitians, other health practitioners, and I was asking them, I'm like, are you guys getting results for your clients? And they would say, it's our job to give them the science and the plans. It's their job to follow it. You can't force people to follow a program. And while I do believe that there's some truth to that, I was also like, I think that there's more to the story. How can I be in a career where the success rate is so poor that I was so anti-diet, but then I was faced with this like really hard truth of like, am I just like any other diet out there? Is my whole career, my 7 years of university education a scam? Because I'm giving people these programs, but they're not changing. And for me, it even felt like I was hanging on, white knuckling it every single day. And deep in my heart, I was like, this just couldn't be it. This couldn't be the end of where my career is just beginning from this kind of a place. And I just knew that there had to be more to the story.
So I love so much that you're grounded in creating the impact, because so many people will go and get the degree. And at the end of getting the degree, they say, well, now I'm good. And then they take the position of, well, it's my job to give the information. I've done that job. And that's where it ends. And you kept asking the question. We love to talk about at the InPowered Life podcast that we always have this inner drive, this yearning to have, to be, to do, to achieve. And that's clearly yours, is to create that impact. And so the question constantly reverberates within you. I would love for you to tell us a little bit, what are the approaches that you do take? What is different between you, as per se, if I was going to go and seek out a dietitian versus coming to work with you at the Mindfulness Institute?
Yeah, so I'll share some things that I learned in school and how I do things quite opposite now. I appreciate that I became a dietitian. I love that I understand how the body works. I love that I learned about vitamins and minerals and studies and nutrition, and all of that was helpful and valuable. But there are some core concepts that the health industry has that kind of floods our minds of the way things are that we should approach health, that I think is actually keeping us stuck and keeping us trapped. And one of the things is that we're expected to get this health program. We're supposed to set these health and nutrition goals without really understanding the deep roots of why we created our behaviors and what actually truly drives our behaviors. And when we don't understand what really drives our behaviors, we end up using willpower and motivation, but it doesn't actually hit the deep roots. So it's almost like you're constantly trimming a weed instead of pulling a weed when it comes to your behavior. And so it leaves a lot of people in these same patterns again and again and again, wondering, what is wrong with me? And I felt that pain more than anybody, because as I continued to learn more, I tried using more knowledge and after my degrees, I continued to get more certifications and more knowledge because I personally felt myself start to struggle. And so I was like, but I'm doing everything that the health industry tells me, that my school taught me, which is you just follow the plan, you calculate your calories, and you use this amount of motivation every day and this inspiration to just do it. But we're actually missing, it's almost like an iceberg. It's just, knowledge is the tip of the iceberg. There's this depth underneath that we can't really see. And so I think when people struggle to change their behaviors, I have deeper compassion and understanding more than anybody, because I really started to struggle. I would really go through these sprints of like where I was really doing it and then losing control, and it got worse and worse and worse. And so I really felt the heavy weight and the shame of that, because I'm like, I'm the expert. I should know more than anybody. And so nothing ever changed. I stayed stuck in these cycles. I tried more intensity, more fasting, more leaving temptations out of the house, more, just everything more intense, more tracking, more rigidity. And it actually got worse and worse and worse. And it pulled me further and further and further from understanding what was happening. So I think that what the health industry teaches us is that when you're struggling, you need more accountability, more tracking, more appetite suppressing, more avoidance of temptations in your patterns. And the only thing that that's doing is keeping us trapped, because you probably know what happens when there's something that we don't like that we avoid and we pretend like it's not there. It holds its power over us, right? It always comes back. So when we have a pattern or a craving shows up for a food that we're deeply attached to, and we're like, no, I don't want to look at it. And it's like you're pushing a balloon underwater and you're like, it's not there. I don't want to see it. I won't do it again. And it comes back up, and you push it down and it comes back up. And that's just a sign that it's like, it's holding its power over you because you don't understand it. And we're saturated in a society that tells us to fear these things, to fear your cravings, to fear your own body, to fear your thoughts and outmotivate them. And for me, it kept me trapped in the same patterns and shame and cycles until I shifted the way that I looked at my experience. And I became my own research project, and I started to get curious. And for the first time, instead of moving away from the things that I hated so much, that I was so angry and so frustrated with, instead I started to move towards it. And so mindfulness, people ask me, like, what does mastering mindfulness mean? Is it meditation? What does that mean? And I think of the word as mastering as it's this ongoing, anything that you put your focused attention towards. So instead of away, we're mastering, we're moving our focused attention towards. And then mindfulness is bringing a greater awareness. And so I'm guiding people into having greater awareness of these parts that they have probably shamed and have been afraid of and tried to move away from. And we're actually moving towards it. And when you move towards it, you start to understand and you're like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. This is why I've been stuck in this pattern. This is why I'm getting this craving. This is what my body has always been needing. And the coolest thing is your food becomes this entry point to deep, deep self-exploration. You start opening up this, like, it's like, wow, there's all of this about myself and my attachments to food and my patterns and what I've been needing that I couldn't see because I was shaming it and willpowering my way against the thing that I didn't like. Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense. And I'm sure that there are so many people listening to this saying, oh, hallelujah, someone's finally speaking the truth. Because, I think about me just as an example. I am somebody who pays a tremendous amount of attention on my body. And so I'm constantly biohacking. I'm wanting to live the highest and the greatest potential that I can. And at one point in time, I was measuring all my food, macros and all. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I was like, this doesn't feel fun to me. I don't want to live a life where I can only have so many heapings of this and so much of that. And to know everything is put into a little container for me and packed into the fridge. And that's the label of what I can eat on this time and this day. And it's really, it felt overwhelming to me to have that much focused concentration on simply just my nutrition. And you're saying, with all the knowledge and everything that you've had, that it was so overwhelming for even you that it gives me a little bit of relief to say, okay, well, thank goodness it wasn't just me, because I thought there was maybe I'm just lazy in that area because it felt so, I want to say not hard, but just all encompassing. And
Yes.
it took the joy out of everything for me. And so now we don't measure our food. We don't keep a scale in the house. We haven't for 10 years or 11 years. We just eat based on how we feel when we eat something. But for so many people that are listening to this right now, and they're saying, you struggled with it. They've just heard I've struggled with the process of having to measure and manage what I'm eating. But how do we help somebody who is in the thick of it right now and they're listening to this conversation, but they're thinking, well, sure, of course, Gina can do that and maybe Rudi can achieve that, but what about me? So how would you support somebody that's right now in the thick of the struggle? What advice would you give them to start taking back their personal power as it relates to their health and their food?
Yeah, it's a great question. And anyone can really get to this place. And I guess if you look at it, I don't like to look at it as a end point or a destination because it is an ongoing lifelong experience or journey. But the place of where we want to get to is where you don't have like this resistance and pushback so it's like, okay, well, where are we going, right? What does the end point even look like? And what I didn't know was that it was possible for me to just be so present in my body all day long, where I didn't have to think about food, where my body, I could trust that my body would tell me, hey, we need food. It's time to eat. And we're full. We don't need food anymore. And that would be very easy to listen to. It wouldn't have to be a willpower war. I wouldn't have to think about food. I wouldn't have to plan and track for accountability. You can't really start there. There's kind of a process you need to go to get there. And I can explain why that is. A lot of people say, I want to listen to my body. I don't want to track. I don't want to do all those things, but I don't trust myself. I can't do it. And the truth is anyone can do it, but you need to go through a process first. And so where you're starting from is the very first place is like when you're unaware, I call stage 0 is like unaware autopilot. You have no idea why your behaviors are the way that they are. You're not even thinking about it. Everything is just on autopilot. A lot of people are in denial at this stage of like the pain of their behaviors. And if you found your way to this podcast, you're probably not in unaware autopilot because there's something that you're like, oh, there's something that's interesting me and pulling me. And so if you can break that autopilot, this lack of awareness of your behaviors or the pain that you're going through, you can move to the second stage, which is like a confusion stage of like, I don't really understand why I'm doing what I'm doing, but I really want to I want to learn. And a lot of people have a lot of shame around this time because they don't understand their behaviors. And so if you're in this place where you're like really confused about why you've been going through these on and off cycles, the best thing that you could do is to start getting curious. And that's a big switch. That's like a huge switch. If you can just shift from judgment, which our society puts a lot of judgment on when you don't have self-control, you don't have discipline. It's the thing that is keeping you stuck. If you can just start by shifting your mindset to, I want to be curious and I want to open my awareness. I want to actually turn up the volume on the things I've been so uncomfortable with looking at. And instead of being like, gosh, you always do that. I knew you were going to do that again. You have no discipline. Instead, if we turn the inner dialogue to, that's interesting. I wonder why I do that. I wonder what's going on. That awareness plus curiosity is going to take you extremely far. You are going to jump forward miles. And that is truly the difference that I see in my students who kind of stay stuck in their patterns versus those who really excel forward and move through the challenges that they're having. Is they're the ones who really leverage that skill of, I'm going to turn up my awareness. I'm going to let my life be my classroom. And I'm just this curious student. I want to learn what is going on with my patterns and my behaviors. And then when we start using this curiosity, we want to start slowing down and really using this time to pause and regulate the nervous system. And the reason why people are not able to really listen to their bodies is because their stress is too high. And there's a science. Can I break down the science of what's happening here?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Okay. I know I'm kind of like getting on a roll, so stop me if you need to. So the reason why most people feel like they can't trust in their hunger, they can't trust in their fullness, they have impulse eating, they know that they're full, but they can't stop overeating. And there's just kind of like this ravenous part of them that almost feels like animalistic, almost feels like this primal, like I try to use my willpower, but then something takes over my brain and I self-sabotage and I go for the temptations. There's a science here. There's a chemistry piece that's happening inside of our bodies. And it comes down to how well your nervous system is regulated. Pretty much everybody that I work with is kind of in this dysregulated nervous system state. And so maybe if you have present day stress or emotions that you're not wanting to feel, or maybe you have past experiences that have left stress or trauma in your nervous system, that shifts what area of your brain is active. So when your body feels safe, that's your prefrontal cortex working, right? It gives you that rational thinking. You're like, oh, I'm going to eat the salad today because that makes sense because I have health goals. And you've probably felt this on a day, right? Like when you're happy, maybe it's sunny outside, a good song comes on, and you're like, I'm going to eat healthy forever. This is so easy. And it's your rational brain that's working. It's your prefrontal cortex. And then if something happens that activates your nervous system, whether it's low-grade chronic stress and it's activated all the time, or an emotion comes up and arises, or an old trigger comes up and shows up, that activates your amygdala, which is like known as your survival brain. And that disconnects the prefrontal cortex that gives you the rational thinking. So if you have an experience where like 1 minute you have a ton of willpower and you're like, yes, I'm eating healthy. And then all of a sudden it's like something took over your brain. You kind of like go tunnel vision and you give into that food. That's that amygdala that's working. And its job is to do everything for survival. So if you're in a state of stress, its job is to say, hey, we're not going to cut calories and lose weight because that's not a good survival mechanism. We need your body to do everything for survival. So there's some research that shows that even the shape of our taste buds will change shape. And then that cortisol increases our appetite and our drive for food. So now you feel abnormally hungry and you're in this almost like animalistic like response. Like you're almost this magnet towards carbohydrates because carbohydrates are quick energy. And so you're in this like primal response where you're like seeking out food food tastes sweeter, it tastes better, your appetite is increased, and your body is doing this to try to protect you. And that's that moment that you're like, I don't have any willpower. I don't have any control over my cravings. And so when people try to restrict food in this state, it feels almost impossible because you're going head to head with your body's own survival instincts. And willpower and motivation does not trump survival and instincts. So the instincts usually win. You might self-sabotage. You go back to your old ways. And then once you've had an abundance of calories, because you just went back and sabotaged your health plan, then your body gets the signal. We have plenty of food. We have plenty of energy stores. Okay, now it receives a signal that the body is internally safe. Your rational thinking comes back online. And that's when you're like, why would I just do that? I just had all of these health goals. I swore I was never going to eat that food again. And then it comes with the shaming and the judgment, which then firms up our identity. You always do this. You can't do that. And what do we know when we believe that something is true about ourselves, our behavior is going to keep following it. So we follow this perpetual cycle. And most people don't realize that they're in this activated nervous system state, living in this state or experiencing these triggers that activate the state, but then they try to restrict their food more. And restricting their food more then activates that stress state even more, which is why someone in this state, if they are in this nervous system activation, the more that they restrict, the more that they usually rebound back for safety. So if you try to change your behaviors in this state, it'll feel like you have to focus all the time and you got to mount all of your energy and all of your motivation. And that might be one step forward, two steps back. But when you use this awareness and curiosity to go inside of that moment of when you feel like your nervous system is getting activated and you're getting curious with, what is my body needing? What is my body telling me? And you're moving towards it instead of running away from it. You can start to learn how to regulate your own nervous system and create that safety inside of your body. And then naturally what happens is the appetite will start to come down. Cravings will start to come down. And all of a sudden, we're no longer in this animalistic prowl to go back to our old behaviors and ways. And then that's when we can properly sense our true hunger and fullness. It won't be distorted from the nervous system. Does that make sense?
So I want to touch on something that you said, and I want to give a little more context for the audience. And I think there's so much value in what you're sharing that I want to make it blatantly obvious. 98% of people on the planet, and those are my estimates, but I think I'm pretty close. 98% of people on the planet are living a life by default. They're in a reactionary state of the unconscious mind controlling all the thoughts and feelings and decisions. But another statistic that's really alarming is that 75% of the human population is living in that state of stress 75% of the day that you're talking about. So they're making decisions, those impulses, those reactions from that state without ever identifying why they're in that state in the first place. So the food becomes another stressor and it becomes another thing that they use to ridicule or shame or self-blame, whereas that's not the cause of the problem. The problem really goes back to the fact that they're in a heightened state of chronic stress.
Correct.
And so the point I want to make so obvious is that you are a dietitian. You support people in taking back their health and educating people in living healthier lives and overcoming all these things. And yet at no point in time have we actually really spoken about food, what we should or shouldn't eat. And I want to emphasize that because you're talking about the mind first. And that when you master your mind, which is what you're essentially doing, and take control of your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, you can then start to take care of the other areas of your life. So if there is somebody that's listening to this right now and they are struggling with food and it is their Achilles heel, they can go for periods of time where they will be on a diet and then fall off the diet. The old behavior comes back, the weight comes back with it, and they just struggle with that yo-yo, or they can never overcome that. They're listening to you talking now, and you're speaking into, well, when you remove the stress, when you no longer feel like you're in a heightened state of stress, you're not reacting, the hunger's going to go away. But what is something that they could do right now? Listening to this episode, is there a tangible tactical tip or tool that you could give someone so that the next time where they're in that state, they can snap out of it or create a new pattern or behavior?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll actually give you the strategy that I work with all of my students on. And the biggest thing is that we want to break our patterns and really use the power of pausing. When you use that power of just taking a pause for a moment and regulating your body, you have an opportunity to make a different choice. And I do think that nutrition and learning about nutrition and health is important. It does empower you, but most people know the foundations. Most people know the basics of healthy eating. Most people can get themselves pretty far knowing, yeah, I should probably eat more vegetables, probably don't need pizza. Like, we know the foundations. So we want to get curious with being able to use a pause to make a different decision. And that's where people's downfall is that they're running on autopilot. They're just grabbing a food impulsively. And so one of the most powerful tools that you can use for yourself is before breaking that autopilot cycle. And so before you go to impulsively grab a food because it's pattern or behavior, taking a moment to take a slow breath. I mean, you can just feel what it feels like when you go, like, you can immediately feel your awareness drop into your body. All of a sudden, everything that's up here that's thinking and stress and autopilot and cravings, now all of a sudden you use your breath, and your breath is the fastest, easiest, most affordable tool to instantly bring some regulation to your nervous system. If you just take one slow breath, you can feel how your body starts to feel safer, feel calmer. And when that happens, then you can start accurately reading the signals in your body. Am I hungry? Do I need food right now? And you can start asking these questions. So I like to have everybody first, I break it down into 3 R's. And the first one is reconnect. So when you're in a pattern and you're about to grab a food, you pause and you first want to reconnect with yourself. You can take a breath. You want to bring your awareness into your body. Some of my students really love to just like bring their hands to their body, and that kind of like moves their awareness down here instead of like thinking up here. Like, cravings like are kind of up here. And so we reconnect and we start asking some questions like, what's going on right now? Do I really actually need food? Is there like a feeling that's coming up right now? What's happening? And then when they can start reconnecting with their body, the next one is to reset. And so they want to get out of the space of that is kind of creating this same pattern again and again. So maybe you're in the kitchen. If you're in the kitchen and your head is in the cupboard, it's hard to really like break the pattern and understand what's happening. So resetting is like reset, get yourself out of the space. I remember hearing a long time ago, Tony Robbins talk about when you want to break a pattern, you almost want to like scare yourself. You want to break the hypnosis that you're in. So he's like, you can clap, you can laugh, you can shake your body, you can whatever. And I like to think of it as like, leave the space that you're in, whatever you need to do. Some of my students are just like, I just need to like laugh or shake it out. But like, break this like hypnosis that you're in, which is like, this is what I always do. I go and I eat this and I grab this. So first you reconnect, get curious with your experience, then you reset, you move yourself from the space. And then after is the most important part, which is your reflection. It doesn't matter if you ate the temptation food or if you did not, it doesn't really matter. What matters is what wisdom you gain from the reflection piece. Most people are like, oh, I didn't do that. I never want to do that again. Let's pretend like I didn't do that. But by doing that, you miss this rich information that's telling you, maybe if you are having a hard time not having a temptation, getting really curious and saying, what was I needing in that moment? Like, was I feeling like I needed something that calmed my nervous system after a really stressful workday? Have I had a day that has not had any sources of pleasure in it? And this has been my one moment, my one source of pleasure. Has this been my source of love because I haven't known really how to give it to myself? Like, what is really happening in that moment that this food is doing for me? Because sometimes when we shame it, we actually miss the beauty of what that food has been providing. And when we do the reflection, we understand what is that food providing, then we can start saying, okay, this is what I'm needing. I'm needing more pleasure in my life. I'm needing to learn how to cultivate an inner resource of love. Or there's something from my past that I'm needing safety around. So those are that's a step-by-step process. I teach it in my Conquering Cravings course. I teach it to all of my students that they use, which is reconnect, reset, reflect. And if you use those 3 R's, that's going to take you extremely far to start learning about what you're truly needing in order to change a food behavior.
I know that you have simplified that process dramatically for us or for the audience today so that they can at least walk away with the tool. But anybody that is obviously struggling with this, I would encourage them to learn a little more about the techniques that you're teaching. I have an example with somebody that I was working with, and I don't necessarily work in any particular area of life. It's in general sense of you living your highest and your greatest potential. But I had a client who was struggling with an addiction to Coca-Cola and by default was significantly overweight and wanted to lose this addiction so they could then lose the weight, take control of their life. And they could never break the pattern of drinking the Coke. And then they would realize halfway through one, oh, dang it, there I am. I'm doing it again. Like, how did I do it? And so teaching them that in that moment, they were in the unconscious pre-programmed state of just doing what they've always done and identifying that when the addiction started was a memory trapped from a really young age where something had happened in his childhood. His parents did something, said something. He had a very strong negative reaction, justified. And then he had a Coca-Cola, a can of Coca-Cola specifically immediately after. And so the dopamine from this, the feel good, this fixed how he felt. And so he learned the pattern of the behavior that every time he didn't feel good, that red can would somehow make him feel better. And he drank it again and again and again until he eventually was at, 14, 15 cans of this a day. And if you just think about the volume of sugar and toxicity that's going into the body because of that addiction. And so having had that conversation with him, I asked him to just sticker on his fridge, are you conscious or unconscious right now? And then he had Coca-Cola in the fridge and he had a little Post-it note. And I'm a huge fan of Post-it notes everywhere. And so I made him label them. And so anytime he went for food or he went for his fridge or he opened the can or in his wallet to take his credit card out to pay, all of it was, are you conscious or unconscious right now? And that was the thing that shifted it for him because, I'm teaching, we're making these decisions from those vantage points. And I love so much that you gave a formula for people to be able to do it. And to just give the audience again the additional value in what you're sharing, dropping into yourself is so important. And you're on the InPowered Life podcast, not the Empowered Life podcast where somebody else externally gives you the power. You have it inside of you, but you need to go inward to be able to do it, to reset, and then obviously to start making new decisions. It is so good. I'm so grateful that you're sharing it. I do want to talk a little bit about obviously food because so many people are struggling with making the right decisions. And the biggest problem that I hear and that I come up in just my everyday life, I said it to you before we even hit record, is just, there's so much misinformation. And so sometimes we're doing the best we can, but what we're putting in our body is also so misleading. We think we're being healthy, but we're not. How can you kind of give us some advice in directing us just with the breadth of knowledge that you have in if we wanted to start making better health choices? How could we educate ourselves better or make better choices? Where would you point us?
Absolutely. I think that my personal philosophy has been, when I got very overwhelmed with like, what's the right thing, what's not the right thing, and especially with ingredients and products. Products are kind of a never ending, researching, learning. Now it's not good. Now it's, but what I think is a philosophy that will stand the test of time is that if we could just get as close to real food as much as we can, make that the goal, right? So let's say if you're starting from a place, for example, let's say you have a Kind bar that's like a fruit and nut bar. It's not terrible, right? It's like a few ingredients. It's a pretty relatively decent choice. Maybe your better choice, if you wanted to upgrade, could be like a piece of fruit and some nuts, right? You're getting less processed, less whatever added to it. And so if we start just thinking in that way, if we say, can I take this thing that I'm eating and can I upgrade and get a little bit closer to real whole foods? And if you're eating, the way that I think about it is most people just don't eat enough vegetables. If we could just load up with lots of colorful vegetables, I think that those colors protect our bodies, protect our cells. They do so many amazing things for our health that if we could eat more vegetables than what we're maybe even comfortable with, make that your one goal and ask, how can I get more colors here? And get creative. Like, how can I just throw in some of this and some of that? If you hate vegetables, one of the best cheat codes for health is broccoli sprouts and microgreens. They have concentrated, you get, I believe it's like 120 times the amount of the beneficial compounds that a whole broccoli plant has, but concentrated into a tiny little sprout. So if you hate vegetables, put broccoli sprouts on things. You can hide them and stuff. I put them in my smoothies. There's ways that you can like sneak things in and start getting creative to increase your vegetable intake and make sure that you always have a healthy protein, whether it's a plant-based protein or a meat-based protein. Dial that in for your body and for your labs and figure out what works best for you. And then I think when it comes to like carbohydrates, we tend to just naturally, most people tend to eat too many carbohydrates. But I like to focus on them from things like vegetables and potatoes and a little bit of grains. But it kind of depends. Like if you're the kind of person who you're reversing some health issues, you're working on losing weight, reversing insulin resistance, you might have less carbohydrates than somebody who's very athletic and can handle all those carbohydrates very well. So I think maybe that got a little too complicated, but but I think that if we just start from taking a look at how we're eating and asking, how can I incorporate more vegetables, more colors? When I'm grocery shopping, I'm thinking less about recipes and I'm thinking more about like, okay, I need my purples. I'm going to buy some purple cabbage. I might buy some eggplant. I might buy some blueberries. And then, okay, I need some reds. I need some red bell pepper. I need some tomatoes. Okay, I need some greens. I'll grab some arugula. I'll grab some zucchini. Okay, I need some yellows. I'll get a yellow bell pepper. And I'm thinking in that way because all the different colors provide different benefits and they work with our cells in different ways and they protect our cells in different ways. So I think that that's one of the easiest strategies is just to think, how can I just start incorporating more colors, more vegetables, and make it my goal to move from processed foods and take it one step at a time to get closer and closer and closer to eating real foods. And I think if you follow that philosophy, you're 90% of the way there. And then you just kind of like dial it in. Like, okay, my body doesn't tolerate this food very well, or my labs show that this is off, so I might need a little bit more of this food, or you kind of like dial it in based on that.
I love two things that you said that I want to touch on again, just for the benefit of the audience. And you said you made it complicated, but I think you made it so simple that I don't want people to miss it. And that is, if you're grabbing something to eat now, what is the next best option closest to that? And if you just start with that analogy of saying, okay, so I've got this, can I go to that? And then when you move from that to the next one, because that to me really does sound so simple and so easy that if I am going for a quick cheat snack or something, I can pause and say, well, what would be a better option than what I'm holding right now? So I'm bringing it into the present moment. I'm not future forecasting. I'm not changing my whole life. I'm just making one choice or one decision. I also love, I said two, but I'm going to mention three. I love the color, coordinating your food. And I had read somewhere that you should have between 24 and 36 colors of vegetables a week. And that if you just had a checklist on your fridge or somewhere and you just check off, okay, I've had, 2 greens today and a yellow, and then you just keep going and adding so that you make sure you have them throughout the course of the week, that would be the perfect, most optimal diet for you, forgetting the volumes of what you're eating.
Sure.
So I love that you mentioned that.
I love that idea. That's a great idea.
I would love to take claim,
for that.
not mine. The last that I want to touch on was, you so beautifully articulated trusting. And I had started the episode today saying my wife and I, we don't really measure our food. We don't weigh ourselves. We really focus in on how do I feel when I eat something? And that wasn't something that I was accustomed to. I have a story that I think the audience will benefit, and I would love your thoughts. When we first started dating, we went to Starbucks and grabbed a cup of coffee. And I'm not a sugary person. I take really good care of myself. But on that particular day, I was like, I'm going to have a white mochaccino or something, one of those fluffy drinks. And so I grabbed one and she said, interesting. And it wasn't a judgment. It was just more like she was noting, wow, that's out of character. And so I was like, what's with the interesting? And she said, well, I just didn't expect you to order that. She's like, could you do me a favor and in 20 minutes time, tell me how you're feeling? And I was like, in 20. So I looked at my watch and I was a little annoyed. I'm going to be honest with you. And so I drank my white mocha and went on with my day. And 20 minutes later, she's like, hey, so how are you feeling? And I said, oh my God, I've actually got stomach cramps. And I did not tie it to the drink, because I'd moved on from the drink. I had no idea. And so she's like, well, yeah, that's got so much sugar and there's so much cream and there's all these things that go into it. And that was a big eye opener for me, because I never tied how my body was reacting to what I was eating. And so I would
Yeah.
love to drop that nugget in, and I would love to hear any
Yes.
of your thoughts on that.
Oh, well, I'm so glad that you did, because it totally brings up, one of my students had struggled with a morning mocha beverage that she would get every morning, and she battled this mocha beverage for years. And then when we started working together, I started having her. I said, "Don't worry about eat it, don't eat it, whatever. Just notice your body. How does your body feel?" And then she texted me one day. She said, "Oh my gosh, that I never noticed. That mocha makes my joints hurt. My stomach doesn't feel good. And I actually feel like I crave sugar the rest of the day." And she was like, "I feel like I officially kicked my mocha habit." And once she started noticing how her body felt, I had some people who, one guy came into my program and he said, "There's two things that I love in life. I love coffee. I love wine. Don't tell me not to have those in my life. I just love them." And I said, "Okay, I won't tell you what to eat or drink or don't, whatever. I just want you to bring your awareness to, like, how does food make your body feel?" And he ended up realizing, he's like, "Wow, I've been drinking wine for many decades and years with dinner every single night, never realizing that I don't like the way it makes my body feel." And so ever since then, he's now been, I think he's been about 3 years without having a drink of alcohol anymore. Cause he's like, this is the first time. He's like, I don't even have to try. I just never noticed. I don't love how it makes my body feel. And he's also down to like 1 cup of coffee, where he used to drink coffee all day long. And he's like, I had no idea. And I didn't have to tell him to change anything. It just naturally happened when he started listening to his body.
I love that you've said repeatedly today. I think it's 3 or 4 times now. Do it or don't do it.
Do it
That's
or
up to
don't.
you.
I don't care. Because when I started as a dietitian, I was like, I told people, eat this, don't eat that. And they wanted my accountability, but they felt like I was their mother at the same time. And they're just like, oh, now I got to report to mom. Here's what I'm eating. So I was like, I'm not telling people anymore. I was like, do it or don't, do whatever you want. But my suggestion is to notice how it makes you feel. And now they're like, oh, my body doesn't like it.
So let's speak into some of the results, because I love to give people an anchor into a potential future that helps them relinquish the anchor that's holding them in the past. And if somebody was going to be working with you, how long does it really take for them to start to see dramatic results? Because I want to bring it back to the audience now. This episode's for you, that in all areas of your life, you can take control. This doesn't have to be tied specifically only to food. This could be in any area of your life. As you just mentioned now, alcohol, and that wine story resonates so deeply with mine, because that was my story. I loved my 2 glasses of wine every single night at dinner because I was a romantic. I loved making dinner with my wife and having a glass of wine and having this beautiful wine glass. And it wasn't the wine. But when I realized, wow, I don't like how I feel the next day, I don't like how foggy my brain is, that I was able to shift that. And again, we're not drinkers now just because we just love how we feel in our bodies. And so if somebody is struggling with a form of chronic pattern or behavior, I don't want to label it an addiction, but if they're struggling with food specifically and they come to you and say, I want to take control of my life, or I want to take control of alcohol, or I want to take control of my health, what would be the journey for somebody who has, let's say, had 10 or 15 or 20 years where they've been a certain weight and they've never been able to sustain that change, and they all of a sudden started working with you? Could you speak into some of the results and potentially
Sure.
what someone could experience and why?
Yeah, I mean, everyone is so unique, but I will say that a lot of people follow a similar kind of experience. When they first begin, and I start having them think differently, that this is a process. You're no longer going to do a 30-day quick cleanse like you used to in the past, right? We're going to extend your timeline, and we're going to really get curious, and we're going to shift your thinking away from having judgment about your behaviors to getting curious with it. I would say that the first experience that they have is now all of a sudden their self-judgment, the intense negative self-talk that they've been dealing with every day starts to quiet. And that's something that can happen very soon when somebody just sees, hey, you need to learn and listen about what's happening in your body. This isn't a willpower thing. And then all of a sudden, the first result that they get is a lot more self-compassion and they're nicer to themselves. That alone will get you really far if you're kind to yourself instead of using a lot of criticism. So I'd say that that's really where it begins. And then as people begin, they start listening to things like their mind and how their thoughts are playing a role in their food behaviors, and they start questioning it. And that alone, just having more awareness of like, oh, how are my thoughts playing a role? My beliefs. I know you talk about beliefs a lot on your podcast. How do my beliefs about food and myself play a role? And they start asking these questions. How are my cravings playing a role? And by creating that space, I would say within the second and third month, people experience a couple of things. One, they experience a lot of discomfort in these few months because now all the patterns that they didn't want to look at in the past are coming into their awareness in the surface. And I tell everyone this is the most uncomfortable time. Let yourself be messy. Let yourself be uncomfortable. It's okay. You're learning. You're a student right now. And so it can be a little bit rocky, but people who understand that this is a rocky time will continue to move through. But people who want to be perfect because the health industry expects us to be perfect, then they're like, oh, I can't do it. And then they go back to square one again, So if they push through and they have more curiosity and they use that skill of having awareness sometimes alone can transform your behaviors. Just like you said with the guy that you worked with, where is this a conscious or an unconscious behavior? Now you switched on his tool of awareness. So sometimes that awareness, people will start feeling more empowered in their food choices. And they're like, wow, I'm already, a couple months in, 2 months into this. And I'm like, I don't want that. That doesn't make me feel good. I don't want that. I don't want that. And then over time, as they start to look at the places of where they're still struggling, okay, there's more for me to learn. And they keep practicing and they see every single interaction with food or every meal as what do I have to learn from this experience? So we start exploring their relationship to it. And at the same time, we're teaching them how to listen to those signals in their body. Oh, this is how food made me feel. This is what my true fullness feels like. This is what my actual true hunger feels like versus a craving. Because before I couldn't tell, is this a craving? Am I hungry? The signals in the body are confused and they're mixed. So I would say around like months, 5, 6, 7, 8, they're really fine tuning what their body is telling them. And then they're just practicing, practice. And it's just like a skill as if you were learning to play the piano. What's my body telling me today? What's it communicating? What is it needing? And you're practicing that. And I say it's like around like a year, you're working on that place where health feels natural and in tune. You're like very in tune with your body. The way that I think of it is, instead of health feeling like force and grit and white knuckling and willpowering, you're actually in harmony with your body because you're like, oh, I'm not this addiction that I once had, or this, intense relationship I had with food. I learned from it and it's no longer holding its power over me. So that softened. Okay, now this one, I learned about this one. And the body, like the nervous system calms down. And so that you can trust in your body, you know how to work with your cravings, you know what they're telling you. And it doesn't feel like this force up against things. It just feels like you're able to properly hear your body's signals and it feels very easy. And I think that is kind of around like a year mark.
I love that you went through that journey because people can really relate to what does it look like to go through it and then to create a long-lasting shift in your life. I don't believe well, let me clarify. You can create change in someone's life in a very short amount of time, but to make it sustainable, I believe, does take a period of time so that, you can hold them on a pedestal, so to speak, until they're strong enough to keep themselves there. And that's the analogy that I like to use. And I love that you're doing that. I want to just thank you so much for coming onto the show. I want to thank you for just pouring your love and your light out and into the world. I don't know if anybody was watching on YouTube versus listening on an audio platform, but you just have the most beautiful demeanor about you, this kindness and this smile. And if I was trying to kick or break my Coca-Cola addiction as an example, and you were the one yelling at me, I would welcome that any day, because you seem to just have such a wonderful demeanor and approach in how you support people. If somebody wanted to work with you, where would they be able to connect with you? Where would they find you? And we'll absolutely drop all of those links in the show notes.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm always sharing as much as I can for free on Instagram and on YouTube. I'm on Instagram, Gina Worful, and YouTube. Right now on YouTube, I'm doing a free 6-part series called Deeper Than Dieting, where if you want to understand yourself beyond just nutrition and health, and you want to go into these deeper layers of what we talked about today, I'm going to break down 6 different topics of like deeper self-exploration if you want to do some self-study and get to know yourself a little bit better. So that's all for free. On YouTube is the Mastering Mindfulness Institute. And then I'm on masteringmindfulness.institute. I have all sorts of classes and things going on, but there's plenty of stuff that if you just want to continue like asking deeper questions and learning about yourself, I share quite a bit on podcasts and YouTube and things like that.
Well, thank you so much for so beautifully sharing with our audience. To the audience, thank you so much for listening. If there was something in this episode that really struck a chord with you, created a shift or a change, please feel free to reach out to either of us, both of us, tag us and share this message with anybody that you feel would resonate with this message. And please go and give Gina a follow. She is a wealth of knowledge and creating a beautiful impact out in the world. I know so many people are struggling with this, and you make it so much more tangible and easy to be able to, or should I say digestible, to be able to create some of these shifts and changes. Thank you for spending time with us. To everybody else, we'll catch you in the next episode of the InPowered Life podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. And we would love your support in leaving us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to check the show notes for more information on how you can find us online and on Instagram. Now go create an amazing day for yourself, and we'll see you again soon.